Always takes a second. Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday. We are so excited to have you here for our Inside the ReOps Maturity Matrix event. We're going to give about a minute or two for people to trickle in. So feel free to grab some water, grab some coffee, whatever you like. And while you're at it, let us know where you're calling in from in the chat. And we do have a fun icebreaker running while we wait. So let us know if you could instantly master one skill, what would it be? We will give a couple minutes. Awesome. Hi, Sarah from Denver. I'm here in Connecticut. It is a dreary day, but very happy to be on here with you all. And fun to see some faces I recognize. Or some names, I guess. Awesome. Looks like many people would love to master speaking any language fluently. If you've chosen that, let me know what language you pick in the chat. Expert is a stretch, but I do love to knit and crochet. Tap into my inner old woman. If anyone else is a crocheter out there, let me know. Awesome. We'll get started here soon. Let's take a second, get some water. Awesome to see people from all over the world. Thank you for tuning in. We are so excited to have you all here. We'll get started in just a minute. I always forget I should prep some music in the background. I will not put you through me singing, but future I will have some nice music playing. Oh no, not gonna sing. I don't even sing for my husband, so let alone all of you, as wonderful as you all are. All right, well, we're gonna get started. We have a packed 30 minutes. So to get started, love to introduce myself. If you haven't already met me, I'm Lauren Gibson. I'm the content marketing manager here at Rally, where we are building a research ops platform that helps teams streamline and automate participant management and recruitment and get access to their own real users for user research. I'm really excited to have all 6 of our wonderful contributors to the Matrix here. They're an incredible group of people, and I can't wait to have you all meet them if you haven't already. Before we dive in, just wanted to give a quick overview again of how this event will work. For the first 30 minutes, we'll be doing a panel discussion here in Contrast, where we all are. And then at 12:30, we will move into breakout sessions. Those will be hosted in Google Meet. Everyone should have gotten those links in your email. 2 different emails went out before in the last 30 minutes. We'll also be sharing those links in the chat many times. So it should be very clear where to go, and you can pick where you'd like to go. And I'll be sharing those details as well. One other thing to note in housekeeping, my colleague James will be on this link past 12:30 in case anyone has questions or if you need help jumping into those links. They are fully open. You do not need a Gmail to join them. And they're very collaborative. So please come ready to chat with our wonderful contributors. We have questions to cover prepared, but as always, if you have questions, drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't get to them, bring them to the workshop sessions. And with that, I'm excited to have our contributors all here with us. We will get started first with some introductions. So we'll start at the top. Andy, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, share a little with the group.
Yeah, hi, my name's Andy. I'm a product manager at Dropbox and a recovering user experience researcher for the last 20 years. I was very passionate to contribute to the UX Maturity Matrix, considering it wasn't something that I had throughout my career, and I really wish this was something that I had.
Amazing. Brad, want to kick us off?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Brad. I use they, them pronouns, based in Brooklyn, as I put in the chat. And yeah, I lead the research team here at Webflow. Been here for 7 months or so. Spent a few years at Auth0 before that. So you've probably seen me on other events and other written stuff and whatnot. Super excited to chat with all of you today. And yeah, I really love the this whole matrix that we've come up with. We'll talk more about how we got to a matrix in the first place, but yeah, it was great working with everyone else on the panel, and of course with Lauren and Oren on this.
Amazing. Bruno.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm Bruno. I'm officially a UX program manager. That's what we go by. I lead UX research operations internally, but also like in simple terms of one of the things that I'm deeply involved is it's everything from getting right participants, from managing those sessions to ensuring that we go from sourcing to incentives. So like that's top of mind, but I'm based out of Dublin, Ireland. Gloomy weather today, but I'm hail from sunny Brazil. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Bruno. Crystal.
Hi, everyone. I'm the research operations lead for MongoDB. We also, handle broader UX stuff like Bruno. I live in the greater Philadelphia area with my husband and my two sport-loving kids, which my daughter is turning 13 tomorrow, and she's my oldest. So this is a big week for us. I've been with MongoDB for 2.5 years. I transitioned from a research leadership role into research operations with this shift at MongoDB, and it's been a really exciting journey. A lot of my experience in the past in research has been in large companies with large design teams, with democratized type research settings, and a lot of compliance and governance needs that I've needed to work through in those spaces, a lot of red tape, et cetera. And I was very excited to be able to join these fellow experts and craft this first tool that I also wish Andy was there for me when I was starting to help us improve our research operations practice. It's a really good tool to help us, as we continue to grow, to level set and re-examine what's important for our environment and the kinds of ideas that are generated through that on what we can work on.
Amazing. Thanks, Crystal. Graham.
Hey everybody, I'm Graham Gardner, he, him. I'm coming in from Chicago. I work at US Bank in UX design and research operations. My background has kind of always been in research operations, but in different forms, from social science. I did a long stint at IDEO, so a lot more kind of discovery, ethnographic design research, and lots of participant recruitment and management there. But I'm also really interested in things like tools and automation. So this has been a really fun conversation for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. And James.
Hey everyone, James Valachi right here, calling in from our second winter right now in New York. I know we're also experiencing that, I heard, across the globe. So I'm head of global UX research here at HelloFresh. I've been here for reaching about 6 years now. Started out as a solo UXR, really kind of focused more on essentially enabling research, building confidence and decisions. Recently, I've transitioned over to more a newer team called Research Platform, which is effectively research operations. But some of our main goals this year essentially are all around enabling, thousands or so folks to actually do research themselves. And also again managing all the tools, processes, recruitment, all this good stuff found within the matrix. What I'm really excited for too is obviously this group of panelists here. I want to give a really big shout out actually to Lauren too. I really don't think that we wouldn't be here without your great coordination effort and all this stuff. So yeah, I see a lot of applause across the room. A little bit about me. Background is in human factors or applied cognition, so psychology, engineering, kind of into one field. And I really love ResOps. Kate Townsend really turned it on to me like about 3 or 4 years ago, and really kind of been driving ever since. So eager to hear more about what we all have to say today, more about this, and meet some of you all in the chat as well. But yeah, thank you very much. And I guess I'll pass it over back to Lauren.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's been an absolute joy to work with all of you, and I'm just so excited to have you all here. Like it brings me so much joy to see us all on this grid. But to kick things off, like Brad mentioned, we chose a matrix format, and that was a big discussion. This whole process was very, very collaborative. So I'd love to kind of hear, Brad, from you why we chose a matrix format instead of kind of the traditional stage maturity model that most folks see.
Yeah, so I think the backstory here for folks that were not part of the conversation is that Lauren, had this idea to build a maturity model, and they were talking to a bunch of us, getting some feedback. And I looked at it and I just was like, we can't, it was originally one of those like stage 1 through stage 5. And I just was like, I can't assess my entire research practice on one linear scale, right? Like we might be really strong in data governance and really terrible in, you know, process and sort of scope and practice, or vice versa. Maybe our tooling is really far along and really robust tooling support, but our training is not, right? So I think they came to me, they were like, here, give us feedback on these 5 stages. And I just was like, I can't, right? I can't actually do this. So we, you know, through a lot of conversation, got to this point where it was like, okay, how many levels, how many different sort of verticals? And I think we struck a nice balance where it's like, it's not, because if you've got, you know, 8 different verticals and 12 different levels, like that's also kind of impossible. I mean, obviously shout out to the 8 pillars of research. That is like the sort of founding document for research operations, but you know, without levels there, and like we smashed some of those things together to get to the 6 that we have. But yeah, for me, it was just like, you need the ability to, on these different scales, say where you are, and you know, it helps you identify like, oh, we really need to invest more in one of these different areas because our recruiting is great, but our, you know, knowledge management sucks. So it's every company I've ever joined, every research practice I've ever, you know, worked on, built out, you are relatively strong and weak in different areas based on, you know, what has happened historically and what your company sort of needs and prioritizes. There's another point sort of later on where like we are all in very different companies and different size, you know, sort of maturity. So like I work mostly in startups. Guess what? We really don't care about data governance as much as like large publicly traded companies do. That's just the nature of the beast. So yeah, I wanted to
No,
make sure.
we're telling on you, Brad. We're telling on you.
It's always been a mess, right? We do the best we can, you know, ethical, scalable, impactful, and I forget. I've got like 4 principles that I'm like, this is what research practices should be, but like ethical is one of those things. Impactful, that's the last one. But you know, the relative importance, it's just going to differ by company. So to build out something that works for everyone was my sort of like the driving force for me.
Yeah, thank you. Crystal, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think we all had a similar reaction to, and I think that's perfect because you start somewhere. You start with an idea, you take a look at it, you examine it from your own context and figure out like, can you make use of this? What can I offer to help this be better? And I think we struck just the right balance in there to show some leveling, but not orient to leveling, and divide it by the necessary groupings where you can really lean into those spaces for your context and figure out what's the right step forward in the right position that you're currently in right now.
Yeah. And that was something on our side, on Rally's side, that we really wanted by bringing you all in, is you all have like your own experience at different orgs. And when I really appreciated that each of you brought like, hey, I thought about this matrix. How does it literally fit into my org and how can we make it different? And that was context that I didn't have myself. So I really appreciated that. And again, the pushback in this process was really important to me. So Brad, I'm very thankful that you brought up the matrix idea and that everyone was thinking the same thing there. I'd love to kind of discuss a little, like each of you brought your own unique insights to this matrix and kind of your own inspiration. So Graham, I'd love to hear a little about kind of your inspiration for working on this project and helping out here.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Brad, I think the idea of like a rigid, like, you know, you input the things and you get a number and you say, hey, great, I'm an A plus or I'm a C. It's oversimplified in a lot of ways, and obviously that's not what it looks like. But in even some ways, like matrix is a little bit simplified, because within an organization, like if you look at a bank, like where I work, each part of the organization might also be on its own journey into those different pillars or different stages and levels. So you can't really look at it organization wide. I think there's also the, like, how are you going to use the matrix to be better question, and is it a tool that's going to work well internally in your organization? I think some people might bristle at the idea of being told that they're not mature, especially if what they're putting out there in the world is really high quality. I think there's a little bit of a dissonance between like, hey, like there's great design, great products, great services, but we can still make improvements internally. And how do you position that from like, hey, I'm a leader internally. How do I tell people, hey, you're not mature? So I think that was a little bit of my, my hope with my input is like, how can we make this feel more like a compass rather than a map? knowing that like everybody's gonna have their own complexity.
Yeah, yeah, and I love the point too. Like the last thing we wanted to do is say like you're not mature. Like that feels a little negative, and I think a matrix can kind of be a little more realistic of like, hey, this area could have some improvement. This area you're doing great in, and that just gives more like warm feelings around this. And change comes from positive feelings, not necessarily always negative feelings as well. Time is already flying, so I'd love to dive a little into how you all have applied elements of the matrix or managed like discussions around maturity even before this matrix even came to pass, because this has been happening long before this matrix was built. So James, I'd love to kind of hear how you've approached that.
Yeah, definitely. So like when I first saw like kind of the first draft of this thing really kind of earlier on to try to get involved in here, I was like, oh, we've been doing this for years. We just didn't really kind of know this. And I think what's really what I love about this, honestly, one quick pitch here is that like, I think all these great minds coming together, right? Like we all got to a similar crossroads at some point, right? We've all had to deal with like, tools, enablement, democratization, recruitment, all those different pillars, right, that we have that are, found in here as well. And what I really appreciated too is kind of, whenever you work across industries, right, compared to, I guess, academia, right, like you're kind of not sharing all your information, right? Like we're still in the competitive landscape, right, wherever we're working from, industry secrets, industry best practices. What I love about this matrix is what we ended up seeing a little bit more into that window of like, what are other companies doing? How are we doing already in? It's like, oh, cool. We're actually, we're on track. Or hey, you know what? I also had this exact same issue going on. And I think too, really highlighted in this package are all those similarities that we've come across. And what I like to see is like those differences that we might have had too. I know there are some things where it's like, oh, I never actually thought about this. As this kind of newly formed research platform that I mentioned that we're kind of building out here at HelloFresh, I have to enable studies across 16 different geographies, 8 or so different product areas. It's very, very, it's very different. It's very, very segmented, so to speak, right? It's really more of this global approach. And I am also seeing too, like kind of all these industry best practices that we've gathered together, and kind of really branching out on that and really kind of helping to drive better decisions, learn from all of our past mistakes that we've made. We know that we've made a ton. I certainly have. I know we all have at some point too, right? As we kind of build out these new practices, because honestly, let's admit too, right? It's a newer field. No one's really done this before. It's kind of still in its infancy stage, so to speak. So it's really fun to really kind of build this out and learn from everyone's mistakes, and obviously also, come together and kind of strengthen it as well to deliver a great research operations, or again, a great ResOps mission moving forward.
Amazing. Bruno, I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially on like discussing maturity as a team and with, cross-functional partners, stakeholders. How do you kind of approach that?
Yeah. I personally like to start discussions with problem statements and what solutions are needed. I think in some cases, you don't know how people will approach if you bring a framework and they're like, oh, here comes the theory guy, or like someone that's too academic. So, and I think like the way I would like to approach things is talk about problem statements that people are feeling every day and that they're really trying to look for a solution. And what I really like about this framework is that you can then contextualize. And I think like how James is alluding to, you can position how another company might be interpreted and what level they might be, and gives you clearly objective. It's like, what's happening at that level that you were not doing here. So I first like to talk about the problem statements, look at the solution. I think that the matrix provides a great framework for you to look at what action items you need to take. But then you can bring the framework and then talk about maturity, because it opens doors for other discussion topics that you might want to have, or potentially blockers. And the other thing about the matrix is the interconnectivity of all these different things. So you can talk about a lot of like repository management for your research, but if you're not thinking about engagement and activation, like what are you going to be doing all of that work for if you're not leveraging your insights? So I think like I really like to first talk about a problem, and then you contextualize and you start opening the doors from that.
Amazing. Anyone else have any thoughts on how to kind of approach that maturity discussion, or how you've been using it in your org? Otherwise, I've got plenty more questions. Just wanted to open it up quick. Awesome. Cool. So obviously, like, you all have the matrix. Now, how do you approach evaluating your maturity? We've shared out that template, and we hope the matrix is helpful for assessing. But what would you say, and I'd love to hear from you, Graham, what would you say is the best mindset for approaching this process? And any advice you'd have on how teams should go about that?
Yeah, so and like we were saying before, organizations are going to have differences within them. But I think from like a research operations philosophy standpoint, I think of research ops as kind of making strategic decisions about what should be kind of a horizontal layer across an organization that we maybe standardize or centralize, and what are the things that we allow to kind of be organic and kind of bloom in the direction that they need to bloom. And so in some ways I would approach a maturity matrix in that same way of like, what are the things from the maturity matrix that we want to approach from an organization level? What do we want to give to people and have them run? So I think you have to be both like flexible, but not give up just because we're not all going to be automatons.
Totally. Brad, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't have a strategy necessarily. It's just a mindset, which is it's not going to help you to pretend, right? It's not going to help you to be like, oh, we're really great at this thing. Like you got to put yourself in this mindset. Like I think in the notes for this, I was like, go for a walk, pour yourself some coffee, right? Take a long, hard look in the mirror and then get to work, right? It's just like, you need to be so honest about, do we have templates for these things? Do we, like, I mean, GDPR is a really good thing to think about. Like, do we have a process to, like, for the right to be forgotten? Probably not. You probably can't actually, like, do you have a consistent customer ID across all the different places where data lives? Like, you probably don't, right? And like, that's okay. And you're not going to have everything, but you can't pretend like, yeah, we can totally go purge every single piece of data we have about a customer in all of our surveys and interviews and recordings and our insights repo and all that. Like, no, just be honest with yourself.
Totally. And I think one goal we had with the matrix as well was to make becoming more mature in these areas and as a whole a little more tangible and like digestible. Because I think I've felt this way with maturity models of it feels so unattainable. Like there's this beautiful dream state that just feels like vague and like, how do I get there? And so I feel like working with all of you, we really tried to give actionable steps. And obviously those steps to take will be unique to your org. And that's just, there's that nuance we just cannot possibly speak to for every team and org, but making it feel like, okay, this is manageable. I can do this with what I have. Because the other thing that's hard is bandwidth. A lot of teams are small. They're overworked. There's so much to do. And maturity may sometimes feel like one more thing to add on, but breaking it down. And then, like you said, Brad, being honest, taking a break, walk, get some coffee can make that feel a little more manageable, or at least that's the hope.
Yeah. Lauren, if I could add in there too, actually, this came to my mind here. I know we talk a lot about within the tech industry, tech debt, right? Or again, like typically like what is some legacy code that we need to update, right, across the org, right? Or we have design debt or we have UX debt. Well, everything about kind of research debt too in that same case, right? Like what I might go through here, so I might identify what are my areas where I'm not so mature or I really like, I haven't done this before. I should do this. Use that debt to kind of build out a little bit of a roadmap. That's how I might approach that. It's through this kind of research debt mindset.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for jumping in. Awesome. Looking at the time, we have about 5 minutes. 2 more things we want to get through. I'd love to hear, starting with you, Bruno, any advice you have for teams that are just starting to think about ReOps maturity and how to kind of, approach assessing and, advancing in some of these areas.
Yeah. One answer is very simple. Just get your template and do it. Play with it. Like go and start tinkering and see what that looks like. Every journey and path is very unique. So I think like you got to look at the matrix and see what you really gravitate towards and what is like that kind of like red area that you want to make progress on, and then start investing there and start like creating like an environment where there's an understanding around you of like people that are going to invest. I think what I would say don't is just get the matrix and try to apply it for the sake of it, right? I think that's where you might be losing the focus on what you really want to achieve as an organization and as a research function to influence product at the end of the day. But there are a lot of like cool exercises that you can do with this that I think we haven't even scratched the surface. Like get different people that are leaders in the organization, ask them to make a copy, and then everyone grades independently, and you come together to see how you guys are looking at this. Are people like grading things in the same way? There are different exercises that you can actually get people to be more invested, but just start playing with it. There's not much more that I would say. Like get to work. That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I love that. Graham, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think I always also think of it from like a change management perspective of like how are you going to get momentum. So obviously like things that are going to make the biggest impact are high priority. You also need to think about like what can I do to get quick wins to prove value. Obviously everyone thinks about that from a business perspective, but also from a research ops change perspective. Like how can you prove that research ops is providing value and making research like exponentially more impactful? I think from like an ops person's perspective, I always have this like, let's just put our pants on before we start building rocket ships kind of perspective. But I also think like, because there's a lot of companies where there's a lot of people running around naked building rocket ships. But I think like you can't just only put your pants on all day long. People are going to get bored. And you think about like, what's going to provide an environment where everybody working around me is also going to be excited to come to work every day and feel passionate about what we're doing. So you kind of have to like balance, like, let's, pull our pants halfway up. So and tie our shoes a little bit and then start working the rocket ships too.
I'm going to hold on to that like image in my head for weeks, probably. Amazing. Brad, I know you had a quick thought as well. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about this question, I go back to some advice and feedback I got from Abra Martin, who's at ServiceNow, that I put together a 3-year vision for research ops and enablement at Webflow, and she read it and she was like, this is really generic. Like, you need to figure out what is the specific thing that your company, your organization, your team needs. How do you leverage the strengths of the people you have? Where are the gaps that you may need to fill? Like, don't take this, our maturity matrix, and make a generic plan. Be as specific as you can.
Absolutely. We have 3 more minutes to wrap up this portion of the panel. We'd love to talk a little about what's next for this matrix. So obviously, we plan to revise. Like, things change. We're learning a lot by having this out in the wild. So first call, as you have feedback, let us know. Let us know how you're using it, what's not working, what's been working. And that will help us, because we want this to be as helpful as possible for all of you. But Andy, I'd love to hear kind of what you envision is next for this matrix.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying, like, when I opened the panel introducing myself, I mentioned that this is something that I wish I had, and it was echoed by a number of folks in the room here. And if I may use a movie quote, it's the question that brought you all here. You know the question, just as I did. What is the matrix? And now we have the matrix. So as folks have mentioned, we hope that's what's next is, one, it is a tool that's used for self-reflection. It's a tool that's used for self-reflection for yourself as someone who is working in research or research operations. It's a tool which can be used with your management chain to know how they're thinking about and evaluating you. It's a tool that can be used with your peers. It's a tool that can be used as a discipline as large. Throughout my career, I've spent time going from mature organizations through to more immature organizations. And the way that I've been going through this journey is just by learning from those previous experiences, talking to others, and making it up as I go along. I feel like we now have this tool as something to be building upon. And as Lauren mentioned, and as Riley has been doing, they're creating a community for people to voice their perspectives and creating a collective discipline for us to be moving forward. And ultimately, that's what's going to lead to the advancement of research and research operations.
Absolutely. Brad, want to take us home? I know you had a couple of thoughts as well. Last quick thoughts on what's next.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a lot of it, right? Like, the guiding light for us here is like, is this actually useful for you at the end of the day? Like, we can change the number of levels, we can change the, how many different ways we break it out, but like, is this helping you plan a roadmap? Is this helping you assess your team? Is this helping you win, discussions around resourcing and budgeting and all of that? Because if it's not, tell us, right? Like, we don't want to make a thing that goes off somewhere and doesn't do anything. Like, we want this to be as actionable as possible. So, we need your feedback to fix it if it's not working.
Absolutely. Like Annie said, this community is important and all your voices are so valuable here. Thank you. This has been amazing. I probably could have gone for 2 more hours, but I won't put any of you through that. It's now time to head to breakout sessions. So Sydney's been sharing those Google Meet links in the chat. You can jump through different ones. You don't have to stay in one. As I said, my colleague James will be staying on here for a couple minutes after to make sure people get in the right room. And if anyone has questions, last thing, you do not need a Gmail to join these links. So click them, join right in, and we will see you all in the breakout rooms. So we'll all head there now.